Let's roll.
Hello and welcome to the Must Read Alaska Show. Here you get relevant and timely content you won't find anywhere else. You can learn more by going to mustreadalaska.com, and this show can be found on YouTube, Facebook, X, and your favorite podcast site. Let's talk truth about politics, the economy, and all things Alaska. Now, the host of the show, former state legislator, combat veteran, small business owner, and all-around great guy, Ben Carpenter.
Well, welcome to the Must Read Alaska Show, friends. I'm Ben Carpenter, your host and guide on this journey of discovery of truth and independent-minded thinking. Must Read Alaska exists because discovering the truth is hard. It calls upon us to be relentless in defense of common sense, our faith in God, and the exceptional values enshrined in our Constitution. Freedom is not free, and it's not for the timid. It was not secured by the weak of heart or mind. Maintaining freedom requires every one of us to be alert to daily encroachments on our liberties and on the grand deceptions of those seeking power and control over others. Every generation must pledge their lives, their fortunes, and their sacred honor to maintain freedom, and we must never take our freedom for granted. We are not anti-government. We are pro-government, of the people, by the people, and for the people. And today we have a special guest with us from Repeal Now, Bernadette Wilson. Hello, Bernadette. How are you?
Good to be with you, Ben.
Well, we've got a second attempt at repealing the ranked choice voting that Alaska has adopted. We attempted that during the last election cycle, and now we're going to do it again, I guess. We have listeners that are not necessarily Alaska residents, and so they may not, fully understand what ranked choice voting is. Can you give us an overview of what ranked choice voting is?
Yeah, so ranked choice voting did a couple things. It did away with the traditional closed primary. So in a traditional closed primary, of course, each party would kind of pick their nominee, and then those nominees would go forward in what became a head-to-head election. With ranked choice voting, it's no longer that way. Anybody can jump in, vote in that open primary, as we call it now. And then instead of just your top two going on traditionally, Republican and Democrat, now you have your top four that move on. Once those four voters get to that general election ballot, now Alaskans are asked, voters are asked, rather than voting for one, can you actually vote for four? And why don't you rank them in your favorite, who's your number one favorite, who's your number two, who's your number three, and who's your number four? So it has led to what we call a jungle primary. And then you go through all these different rounds of counting now, rather than having one simple, straightforward round of counting. It has disenfranchised voters. It's been incredibly convoluted for people to understand. We see people who are only voting for one. They're not voting down the ticket because they simply don't understand it and they've been discouraged by it. We need to end that so that we have a clean, clear voting system as we go forward.
You used to have a primary system that you had basic political parties, candidates rise from that political primary. Did that prevent people who didn't participate in parties from participating in the election process?
Absolutely not. In fact, we heard that line of BS multiple times during this last effort. If you repeal this, first responders aren't going to be able to vote. People aren't going to be able to vote in a primary. They're going to be able to vote the exact same way that they voted before we had what we refer to as RCV. So it's just simply not accurate. They can absolutely vote in those primaries. Can you be a Democrat, a registered Democrat, and vote in a Republican primary? No, you can't. But quite frankly, unless you have malicious intent, why would you want to do that anyways? It becomes an entirely moot point. So this was put on the ballot in front of voters in 2020. You'll remember, Ben, it kind of came up what seemed like it kind of slipped under the radar in 2020. There were a lot of people who, as we headed into that November election, even in the summer, they simply were not paying attention. Even Republicans, I have dear friends that pay close attention to politics and did not realize that this was coming up on that ballot. It kind of snuck up on us. And of course, voters opted in this very long, convoluted ballot measure, it was sold to Alaskans as well. We're going to get rid of dark money. Nobody actually talked about the election component. They wanted to talk about the we're going to get rid of dark money component. And it got by voters. Ironically enough, you fast forward to 2024, and it was $15 million of outside dark money that fought to keep ranked choice compared to roughly $200,000 that was raised by the side who said, hey, it's time to repeal it. And so I think that Alaskans now see through that dark money argument was nothing more than a message that somebody had poll tested somewhere. It sounded good. It was great clickbait. So they ran with it. It was incredibly deceiving. And despite that monetary difference in the $15 million of dark money and the $200,000, we still came incredibly close. You'll remember that was determined by roughly 750 votes, not even. And so all we had to do was flip 350 more votes to be able to repeal this. And so that's where we're at right now, is we're saying, you know what? I think that Alaskans now realize this hasn't done a darn thing to get rid of what they call dark money. Do you really think for any moment, Ben, that the liberals and the Democrats wanted to get rid of dark money in politics? That's absurd. It's absolutely absurd. The messenger themselves should have been the indicator that we were not being told the truth.
What's the repeal process? Are you using any partners or doing this with anybody, and where are we at now in the process?
Yeah. So what happened was when this failed back in November, there were 3 of us that signed on as the primary sponsors with Division of Elections and said, hey, we'd like to get this back on the ballot. We submitted the language to Division of Elections, and then they, of course, gave the go ahead. And we now have signature booklets in our possession. They've been distributed out all across Alaska. I would encourage people to go to the Repeal Now AK website or find us on Facebook, and you can find opportunities to sign. If you want to get a book and collect signatures, you can absolutely do that. But we are actively collecting those signatures. What we will need to do, Ben, is to collect roughly 35,000. It's just under 35,000 signatures that we will be required to grab from all over the state of Alaska. In addition to that 35,000 signatures, we are required to grab signatures from 35 out of the 40 House districts. That number, that 35,000, where that number comes from is it's based on a certain percentage of people who voted in the last general election. So you have to have a minimum of 7% of the signatures of the people who voted in the last election in each district. And then you have to have a minimum of 10% overall. Once those signatures are collected, they will then get turned back into the Division of Elections. The Division of Elections will check them, make sure that there's no duplicates, that there's no errors, that they're indeed valid signatures. Once those signatures are validated, then we will have the opportunity to go on to the the 2026 ballot. Now, this is a key component that a lot of people have asked about and some have missed. If signatures are turned in before the legislature convenes in 2026, so let's call it the middle of January, if signatures are turned in before that, then we will indeed be on the 2026 ballot. If signatures are not turned in until roughly the middle of March, then that would mean that we would be on the 2028 ballot. If signatures are not turned in at all by the middle of March, if we don't hit that 35,000 threshold, then it would just fall off and it wouldn't be on the ballot at all. So obviously we're aiming to get signatures turned in before the middle of January to be on the 2026 ballot. Some have asked, will you be on the primary ballot? Will you be on the general election ballot? We don't have control over that. That will be determined by the legislature, and the last day that the legislature gavels out of session will dictate whether or not we are on the primary or the general election ballot. So there is a statute there which says that we have to have a certain number of days from the time that the legislature convenes to the time that we have a statewide election in order for a ballot measure to appear before voters. So that's the timeline that we're looking at. And like I said, whether it will be on the primary or the general election is not something that will be within our control. I've had a lot of people ask me, Bernadette, will this be, am I going to vote yes or am I going to vote no? You know, Ben, that was confusing for a lot of people the last election. They were voting no, thinking that it was, I don't like ranked choice. No, I want this to go away. No to ranked choice. And they didn't realize that you actually had to vote yes in order to get rid of ranked choice. It was yes to repeal. And unfortunately, we don't have control over that. That's determined by Division of Elections. They're the ones that say, hey, it's a yes, no, it's a no vote. And that is dictated by the language that is then presented to us.
So how's the language presented at the ballot this time?
It'll be a yes vote.
Okay.
Yep. We'll be going for a yes again.
All right. Well, sounds like your organization's probably a 501c3. You're not going to be able to do this yourself. You're going to be looking for partners throughout the state to get enough signatures. Is that correct?
Absolutely. And we have regional chairs, depending on your area of the state. We have regional, signature gatherers that are lined up all over. Again, I would really encourage people to go to our website, go to our Facebook page. We have several people who are kind of running as the point of contact in their respective area of the state. They've got books that they can hand out. We've got places where you can sign up. And of course, it would be remiss of me to not mention, Ben, we're looking for contributions. This effort is going to take money. The signature gathering process is going to take money. So we've got to get some money in the bank to cover the expense of things like mailing the books out, things like that. And so I'm not being paid. None of your sponsors who put this on the ballot measure are being paid. Nobody is making any money from this. We did have a few professionals that we've got to pay to come in to help with certain things, financial reporting with APOC and things like that. But we're running a very tight operation. It is going to take some money. And I would encourage every Alaskan out there. There's no amount that is too small. If it's $25, if it's $10, we need those contributions. $10 can help us get a book mailed out across the state. So.
Well, thank you for that. Partnership is so doggone important, and so is raising money. We at Must Read Alaska, for those that aren't aware, we have a new partner that we've recently brought on board. And I'm really excited to tell you about them for a couple of reasons. As we all know, good coffee is something that you can enjoy, and even better when coffee you buy goes to a good cause. We're proud to bring on 7 Weeks Coffee, a new coffee company that created their name for a purpose. The company's name comes from the size of the developing baby at 7 weeks, the size of the coffee bean, and the first time a heartbeat is clearly detectable. Their mission is to help fund the pro-life movement one coffee cup at a time. They provide you with the world's best specialty coffee. It's mold and glyphosate free and comes from organic and regenerative farming practices, meaning it's healthy. Not only is it good coffee, but they donate 10% of every sale to pro-life pregnancy care centers throughout the nation, which amounts to about 50% of their profits. Together with Must Read Alaska and 7 Weeks Coffee, you can also help make a real difference one coffee cup at a time. Go to their website, 7weekscoffee.com, and use the promo code MRAK, as in Must Read Alaska, for 10% off your purchase. So, Bernadette, if someone's interested in getting involved, you talked about regional representatives. How does someone contact you or the organization and get involved?
So I would encourage people to go to our website, Repeal Now AK. You can also look us up on Facebook. So either one of those options are a great way to reach us. You'll find contact information up there. Our email is up there. You can send us a note, and we'll be out all across the state. So
those are individual efforts that are going to go to get signatures. Are there going to be any events that the signature gatherers are going to be at, or is the organization planning any regional event?
Yeah, we have had such a great group of volunteers already. I mean, they've been showing up at some of the home shows and things that are out in Wasilla, up in Fairbanks. So definitely keep an eye out for us at all of those big events. If there's an event going on at the arena, we're trying to have somebody there. So.
Okay. Well, thank you. Is there anything else that you wanted to share with the public before we end today?
No, just everybody go check those sites out. Make sure you donate if you can. And most importantly, don't forget to sign. This is a new effort. I know that you signed this just a couple years ago. This is a new one. You got to sign again. Repeal now.
It's something that I remember learning since the last election, and maybe it just reinforced in my mind what I already knew. But when you do sign the petition, the signature that you put on that petition matters. Like, it has to match what's on the state's record for the name that is associated with you and your address. So for myself,
Correct.
Benjamin Carpenter is how my driver's license is written. If I sign my name B Carpenter, as I normally do, or Ben Carpenter, then it's not the same as what is on record at the state for my name, and that matters. Is that correct?
Yeah, so we've encouraged people, if you know what's on your voter registration, sign it that way. What the state has told us is, hey, if all the information, lines up and somebody writes Ben instead of Benjamin or Chris instead of Christopher, we're gonna give it to you. We recognize that obviously it's the same person, but we are encouraging people, follow what's on your voter registration and make sure that you fill out that information completely. Some people see that address portion and they only want to fill in the street name, or they want to put in Anchorage, Alaska. We actually need your full address in that area.
Very interesting. Okay. Well, thank you. And I'm sure that you're doing training with the people that are going out and collecting signatures so that they can remind folks as well.
Yes. Yep. There's a whole little guide up online that everybody has to acknowledge that they have read before we even issue them a book. So
very good. Well,
we want to make sure that every signature is counted and that no one's hard work is being done in vain. So,
well, thank you, Bernadette, for putting in the time and the effort to do that. And I appreciate you coming on the show today to help educate Alaskans on what they're hopefully going to be voting on. And even non-Alaskans who may be watching the podcast and have folks in their own area trying to promote ranked choice voting, and maybe they can follow what's going on with us here at the state of Alaska. So thank you again for coming on the show. If you have listened to this show and you want to help support getting this message out, then go to mustreadalaska.com and click on the donate link. Participation in this podcast and donating to the cause will help us keep the lights on and help us bring guests on that highlight conservative values and move the needle. So thank you for listening. And until next time, until the next show, stay frosty, Alaska.